Since I can remember, we have always lived in this village. It stank of a putrid smell due to the deadly swamp that encircles the village. There is only one way in and out. Crocodiles and all manner of beasts live in the waters to poisonous white flowers lining the edges. Beautiful and inviting in the fragrance of sunshine, butterflies and places unknown. Some say it was planted, others say it's naturally occurring. Basically, everything in this place will kill you if you're not careful. Mama tells me as long as we keep faith and follow the rules, we will be safe. Every year a ceremony is held where the elders go forth to the bog. No one knows what happens, but in this journey one is always lost or killed by the marshlands. It's almost as if it's alive as we are. I dreaded the fate of those who didn't return home. Underneath the terror was a curiosity of how exactly they died. We were kept ignorant. Even as children, my friends and I thought something horrifying dwelled there if we forsake our own in such a place. Even going to town was full of peril, and we only left once a month for supplies. My father was taken by swamp during a ceremony and we mourned him. Since his death, I have only had questions. What killed him? Why? What is this important ritual about? It protects, but how? We live in a place no one already wants to go. The sun rarely even visits. When my friends and I turned 18, Ash was selected for the rite. His parents were proud, but they looked profoundly saddened. My heart sank when I watched his parents' faces. They knew something would happen. The adults had to know. I'll follow them with a weapon in hand and the determination to find out the answers I so desperately needed. Ash seemed happy. He was going to become part of something bigger and finally be realized as an adult. This was his rite of passage. Didn't even consider something remotely sinister could be going on. He simply assumed I was jealous. How could I be? Did he forget all about what could be in the swamp? There was a time I might have been, but joy was replaced with suspension over the elders. I followed the procession in the dark, using my eyes and their torchlight to lead the way. It was a cold night with no stars, not even a moon, just pure darkness. Out of sheer bad luck, I slightly slipped. The lanterns gave off enough light to see what I stepped on. A perfectly preserved body. This hellhole had been full of the dead the whole time. Did the swamp take them all? Why did they have no skin now? They are full of puncture wounds. How did they die? I had stopped dwelling on morbid thoughts and caught up to a clearing. I never knew such a place existed, litter with human bones spanning the expanse of the glade. My eyes widened in object horror of the numerous skulls. Snapping me out of my thoughts was the conversation. Thanking my friend for his sacrifice, the green god would be appeased. His parents would be so proud. Ash, run! Run, Ash! I screamed, consequences be damned. Before he could even register my words, a larger vine grabbed at his legs as he begged for his life. I burst through the bushes and rushed to my friend, trying to rip him from the vine. It had grown thorns digging deep into his legs. I pulled against the force of this plant, but it was growing in strength. Soon it began to throw us both around in a rain of blood. The vines ascend higher, covering his torso. As if a boa, it began to coil tighter and tighter around Ash, encasing him in spikes. I heard only a gurgling cry only once. At this point, I was dropped to the ground, still holding Ash's hand. His blood splattered all over my face. It unfurled, dropping a skinless body, only muscle and bone. It stripped the flesh right off him. The elders prayed with joy as I sobbed, covered in gore. Ash was gone. They all knew. They all are complicit in these murders. They knew what happened to my dad. They led victims out in the name of this abomination. This village is cursed. We are all damned. I was desperate. Down to my last few bucks and on the run. The old Seabrook Inn was a haven in my stormy life. It was way off the main road, nestled among a grove of ancient trees, looking like it hadn't seen guests in decades. The elderly innkeeper gave me a wary look but handed me the key to room 417. The first night was uneventful. But on the second, a faint, rhythmic tapping sounded at my window. Startled, I looked out but saw only the gnarled branches of the trees swaying. I chalked it up to the wind and settled back into bed. On the third night, the tapping was louder, more insistent. Accompanying it was a soft, almost inaudible whisper. Straining my ears, I could barely make out a repeated phrase, "Let me in. Let me in." I was on the 4th floor. What could possibly tap on a 4th floor window? I mentioned it to the innkeeper the next morning. His face turned a shade paler. He dismissed it as old building sounds and swiftly changed the subject. But curiosity consumed me. I dug into the local archives, hunting for clues. What I discovered was a chilling tale of sorrow and obsession. 50 years ago, a woman named Alara stayed in room 417. She'd fallen madly in love with a man from Seabrook, but their love was forbidden due to their family's feud. In despair, she'd thrown herself from the window of room 417, her last words being a plea to her lover to join her. Legend had it that Alara's spirit still haunted the room, seeking her lost love. I shivered. Surely it was just a myth. That night, the tapping grew even louder. The whisper turned into a desperate plea, "Join me, my love. Join me." Trembling, I peered out of the window, and there she was. Alara's ghostly silhouette floated outside, her hand outstretched towards the glass, her eyes, hollow voids, fixed on me. Panicking, I packed my things and bolted for the door. But it wouldn't budge. The temperature in the room plummeted. Every shadow seemed to twist and writhe. Alara's whispers now echoed all around, her sorrow palpable in every syllable. "Stay with me. Stay." Hours felt like days. Trapped and terrorized, I desperately searched for an escape. The old legends mentioned her lover, but his identity remained a mystery. The answer to my escape, I believed, was to find out who he was and somehow convince Alara to release her grip on the living. In the room's old fireplace, I found a hidden compartment containing love letters between Alara and her forbidden lover. His name was Samuel, and he never knew of her tragic end. He had written of plans to reconcile their families and unite in love. Their story remained unfinished. With newfound determination, I called out to Alara. "He loved you. He wanted a life with you. Read his words." A gust of wind scattered the letters around the room. The temperature slowly began to rise. Alara's form appeared, more defined this time, reading each letter with tears streaming down her face. I waited. I hoped. But he never came, she sobbed. "He never knew, Alara," I whispered, my own tears falling. "He loved you." A soft light enveloped the room, and Alara's form began to fade. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing one last time before vanishing entirely. The door unlocked on its own, and I stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. I left the Seabrook Inn that very night, never looking back. Years have passed, and life has moved on. But every so often, when the wind howls and shadows dance, I hear a faint whisper, a soft thank you from a love once lost, echoing from the confines of room 417. I strolled down the cracked sidewalk, the air cold, harsh yet refreshing, and I could faintly hear the sea crash against the rocks. My view shifted towards the dark pit of water. I paused in my tracks, opting to lean against the large rocks, keeping me from hitting the smaller rocks beneath. I observed the moonlight hitting the water, making its dark blue color change to a shiny color. I shifted, ready to continue to walk, only to pause when I spotted a figure down by the water. From the shape, it seemed like a woman. I frowned, ready to shout out to see if she was okay, when she suddenly began walking into the water. My eyes widened. It was dangerous. What was she thinking? I bit my fear and yelled out, "Hey, miss, it's late out and the sea is dangerous." I yelled, wincing as my voice cracked at when I froze, my words dying in my throat as the woman, no thing, turned to me, her eyes pitch black, her cheeks sunken in, and her skin as pale as the moon. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out, fear overtaking me as I froze on the spot. She seemed to take notice of my fear and grinned, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth as drool rolled down them, gills flapping on her cheek and collarbone. I didn't even think as I moved back, ready to run and bolt out of there. "Why are you so scared, dear?" she purred out, and I could feel my heart race, hitting my ribs aggressively. I could barely utter words. I swallowed, realizing this woman is more dangerous than she lets on. I was taken out of my trance as my ankles hit against a metal railing, and I quickly turned, darting off into the night, hearing her loud wails behind me. It was 1:33 p.m. I sleep downstairs in a larger house. I live with mom, dad, and my brother, but dad was gone out of town for a few days and mom and brother were spending the night at my cousin's dog sitting. Being in the basement, there tons of noise, but I shrugged it off and thought it was them moving around, but they were all gone. I was home alone. I reached for the light remote to see if there was something or someone, and before I could press the button, I feel a cold breath on my hand. I was froze for a second, but pressed the button and looked around. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs. I slowly walked up, trying not to get shot if they're burglars, but it was worse. A skeleton-like figure was looking in the dimly lit fridge. Trying not to fight or flight, I stalked the figure and followed it into my parents' room and into their walk-in closet. That's when I knew where it came from. The attic. We had a small space to get in for the bathroom vent system, but the attic was the whole house. When I peeked up there looking one way, it was pitch black, and I felt that same breath on my hand that was reaching out in front of me, but it was shaky and stuttered. The figure emerged from nothingness, and I knew who it was. My grandma. But how and why? She could barely speak. I ran back downstairs in a panic and hid in my covers, trying to process everything. Fast forward to now, it's 3 weeks later, and I've told nobody I know or seen. I'm truly traumatized. In the heart of a dense, fog-shrouded forest stood the imposing Blackwood Manor. Its decaying facade loomed ominously, casting a pall of darkness over the surrounding landscape. Locals whispered of the chilling history that clung to the mansion like a sinister shadow. One moonless night, a group of curious young adults decided to challenge their fears and explore the rumored haunted house. Armed with flashlights and trembling courage, they crossed the threshold, unaware of the terror that awaited them. As they ventured deeper into the mansion's dilapidated interior, the air grew colder, and eerie whispers seemed to echo in the corridors. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and strange symbols adorned the floors, telling tales of rituals long forgotten. The group's unease heightened, but their curiosity pushed them forward. Soon, the flickering of their flashlights revealed fleeting glimpses of apparitions, shadowy figures that darted in and out of view. Unsettling laughter echoed through the halls, sending shivers down their spines. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to announce the presence of unseen entities. In the heart of the mansion, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber. The walls were covered in grotesque paintings, each depicting scenes of suffering and despair. An ancient tome lay open on a dusty pedestal, its pages filled with cryptic incantations. Without warning, the room grew colder, and an otherworldly wail filled the air. Panicked, the group tried to flee, but the mansion seemed to shift, trapping them within its labyrinthine passages. Whispers became wails, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The apparitions grew more tangible, their eyes glowing with malevolence. One by one, the group members disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. Frantic footsteps echoed as they tried to find their way out, but the mansion's maze-like design seemed to change with every turn. Dread filled the air, suffocating their breath and sanity. As the night wore on, the mansion seemed to feed on their fear. They were taunted by glimpses of their worst nightmares, haunted by memories they thought they'd buried. Desperation turned to madness, and the line between reality and illusion blurred. When morning finally broke, a single survivor stumbled out of Blackwood Manor, their sanity hanging by a thread. They recounted a tale of terror that defied explanation, a nightmarish descent into a realm where the boundaries between the living and the dead had been irrevocably shattered. Blackwood Manor stood as a grim reminder of the darkness that could lie hidden in even the most innocent of places. The woods grew silent, and locals continued to avoid the area, lest they awaken the malevolent forces that lurked within. And so, the haunting at Blackwood Manor became a cautionary tale, a story whispered around campfires to remind all who heard it that some mysteries were best left untouched.